chess bit 64. Okay, he's got 1 bar of connection, so let's hope the connection remains. And, of course, we are playing a Smith Morra, and we are seeing how the Morra holds up at this level. And it is accepted. E6, knight f3. A6, bishop c4. This is theory. B5, bishop b3. This I know, but the rest I don't. I know we're supposed to castle here. And then at some point we're supposed to just slam a knight onto d5. But I don't remember exactly where. That's the thing. I know we're supposed to play knight d5, but I don't remember where. There's also queen e2, rook d1, of course. Queen e2, rook d1 might be the move here. It makes a lot of sense. I like the look of queen e2. And we will consult Esserman after the game. So queen e2 makes a lot of sense here. If you watch me play the Morra, you will know that this particular rearrangement of heavy pieces is considered very effective because the rook x-rays the queen, the white queen x-rays the black king, and it makes possible and increases the effectiveness of various sacrifices in the center, most prominently a move like knight d5. The big question in these types of positions is always what is the right moment for knight d5. There's also bishop d5. That is a lot more infrequent, but is also a sack that has to be reckoned with. So knight d5 is incredibly tempting here. The point is if e takes d5, we play e takes d5 check, what seems to be a very serious attack against his king. Knight d5, but knight takes b3. I really didn't want to give this bishop away. We can also play knight e5, knight f6, bishop g5, d6. Then we have a sack on b5. Ooh, that looks spicy. I have a spicy idea. So this pawn is a weakness, obviously. My idea is to go, let's try it. This seems dubious, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to start with the move knight e5, exploiting the fact that black's knight is no longer on c6. Now we're going to add the pressure with bishop g5, reinforcing the threat of knight takes d7. Now it's a threat again because the black knight is pinned. So after we take on d7, black will not be able to recapture because they will lose the queen. Well, my idea I think I'm pretty happy with, which is d6 opens up the a4, e8 diagonal. And so it makes possible a very thematic sacrifice on b5. We're trying to attack from all sides here. We're basically trying to attack from all sides. And after knight takes b5, I have no idea what's going on. But that is the fun of the Morra, is occasional chaos. Knight e5 takes f7. I'll often have... Oh, yeah. By the way, we do have knight takes f7 and e5 if black plays d6. Oh my god, we also have some cool ideas with a double sacrifice. Knight f7, bishop takes e6 and e5. But that seems a little bit over the top. Anyways, knight takes b3. So we should briefly consider what happens if we don't take on b3, because there is the move knight takes d7. There's even rook takes d7. So let's calculate. Rook takes d7, queen d7, knight d7, knight a1. Black has too many pieces there for the rook. Black has too many pieces for the rook. If we play knight takes d7, black plays knight takes a1. We take the queen. That looks a lot better, though. Ooh, knight takes d7. The problem there, though, is that black can play a move like queen c7. We can only take one piece at once. No, I think we should just take. Let's not do anything insane. Yeah, this is a very cool idea. Putting the knight on e5 and then attacking this pawn, but also, and I'll show this idea after the game. This is what Mark is mentioning. Knight takes f7 and e5, opening up the black king and winning back the knight on f6. So obviously the attack isn't the same without the bishop on b3. You know, we've still got 1, 2, 3, and potentially 4 and 5 pieces in the direct attack against black's king. Yeah, d6, knight b5, queen b6. There's got to be a move there, though. Okay, so let's calculate. Knight takes b5, queen b6. Do we have an idea? There must be something. Now, we also have knight f7 here, but it's not the same without the bishop. Maybe knight d5. That's a little too crazy even for me, though. So So what I'm trying to figure out is a response to knight b5 and queen b6. So there is knight d6 and knight c4. I mean, we can risk it anyway, but our position is not like, does not warrant it. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to compromise. No, we're not going to compromise. We're going to go knight g4. Yeah, we're going to have to step back. I mean, actually, the knight wasn't even hanging, so maybe rook d3 or something would have been better. Yeah, no, I got a little discombobulated here. I'll show you after the game why knight takes b5 didn't work. A good spot on Mark. Yeah, I'm really bummed this idea failed, but maybe we'll be able to produce some fireworks here. Still. h6, that's got to be a mistake. So rather than developing, black is allowing us to ruin his structure. Oh, and now the idea with knight takes b5 is going to be a heck of a lot more justified. But again, he's got something. Takes, knight takes b5. There's h5 intermezzo. And if we move our knight back, then black takes on b5. Jeez Louise. So in that case, so the big question here is what should take on f6? What I can't seem to decide is what to take on f6 with. I'm inclined to take with the bishop. I think most of you guys want to do that too. And drop the bishop back to f4 in order to launch a direct assault against black's weakest pawn. And of course, we are trying to bishop f6 and knight d5. Oh yeah, that could have been interesting. But bishop g7, I guess. The problem if we're left with just two knights is just that we need a bishop in order to chisel away at black's central pawn mass. Now, you might notice that this particular pawn structure occurs also in openings like the Rouser Sicilian. But this is not unknown in the Sicilian. He goes h5. So again, knight takes b5 fails because of a b5, queen b5, and for instance, bishop c6. So what is the stock plan, the typical plan that we employ to attack the d6 pawn? Well, we know what that plan is. Nothing new under the sun. We double our rooks. We play rook d2 and rook a1. And you might look at this and say, well, I don't get it. Can't black just play the move e5 and ward away bishop on f4? And black can, and maybe even should in some cases, but that creates a gaping hole in the d5 score, which I'm happy to accept that kind of position. b4. Okay, well, we need to move our knight. Where do we move it? Well, we can move it to a4, for instance. That's as good of a square as any. At least it's defended. And I'm very much hoping that one day we get a chance to play the move knight b6. And the thing is, I'm sure the engine will probably evaluate this in black's favor, but these positions are incredibly tough to play. Because, yeah, long-term weakness of black's king, we have very obvious attacking ideas, such as doubling rooks on the d-file, trying to provoke e5, although e5 is probably a really good move now. Wow. We have to play bishop e3, but the good thing about that move is we're preparing knight b6 now. Now we have access to the b6 square. So I feel like we're actually making progress here despite appearances. Now we are dropping potentially the pawn on e4. I don't care about pawns. You can't play this line and really care about the pawn count in any given moment. We're not playing for pawns here. We're playing for checkmate. Is the hole on d5 still good? Well, of course, the fact that it exists is good. And if we play knight b6, then we will have access to that gaping hole on d5. What are we going to do after bishop takes e4? Well, the way I see it, we have two choices if bishop takes e4 happens. Some of you might be tempted by the move bishop b6, which is not a good move because the queen can slide over to b7 and attack the pawn at the same time. f5 by our opponent. I don't think that's a great move. Okay, I see what black is trying to do. He's trying to activate the bishop. Now, we have a couple of choices here. But realistically, we only have one choice. We need to take this pawn. We need to get rid of it so that we don't have to deal with the headache of moves like f5, f4. Now, my guess is he's banking on rook g8. But then we can respond to the move f3. And I'm just not seeing where black's counterattack is. Yeah, this is a Sveshnikov-style idea. The problem is that black's king is so weak here. We have such pressure on the d-pawn, and By the way, why did I not play g3? Who can tell me? Why not g3 in this position? Yeah, now we're in phenomenal shape. Because of queen c6. Yeah, because g3 creates a much more long-lasting and exploitable weakness on this diagonal. Okay, so this doesn't even really create any threats. This is a great example of something I mentioned earlier, which is that at this level, you need to stop being reactive. So I can guarantee you that most of you are thinking about h3 in your minds. But this is a paper tiger. We can just go along with our plan and play knight b6. If black plays h3, big FD. We just play g3 or even g4, but I think g3 is better. And black doesn't have the firepower to exploit that. Okay, rook d8. Here it's important to think in terms of drawbacks. What effect on the position does the move rook d8 have? Well, the rook used to be on the c file. The c file is an open file. And as I've repeated again and again, when there is only one open file on the chessboard, you want to make sure that you control that file. So the move rook c2 comes to mind. We play that move, and we blunder bishop takes f3, which is not good at all. The moment I played it, I realized that he doesn't see it. That was a sloppy little moment. Bishop f3 would not have won the game or anything, but it would have complicated the game. And now, Hannah, thank you for the 5. Aw, that's so sweet. And I will definitely throw you the raid if you're still streaming. What should we do here? It's actually not so simple to put the finishing touches on the game. Let's play positionally. Let's go knight d5. Let's play positionally, drop the knight back to d5. What bothers me is the state of this bishop. This bishop was exerting some annoying pressure on the f3 pawn. So we're going to drop our knight back to d5, try to induce a trade, and then keep infiltrating down the c file, down the d file. I mean, something is going to give here for black. There's no way that black will hold this position together for more than 5 moves, hopefully. Okay, so now the move h3 is even less effective. Like I said, g4 or g3, both moves are totally fine. Let's go g4, because in the absence of the light squared bishop, yeah, now g4 is fully justified, I think. I had queen f3 and rook c1 and bishop f3. Okay, we'll take a look after the game. So apparently bishop takes f3 was not effective. So what is the plan here? How do you actually win such a position? You win by infiltrating. Okay, you can also win by taking free pawns that our opponent is leaving by the side of the road. I don't see a reason not to grab this little baby on a6. Yeah, the sort of narrative of this entire game is that black's king has never found a home. And positions where your king is permanently weak are just objectively very difficult to play, even if the computer evaluates them at one point or another as being better. Okay, so this is last-ditch efforts by black to complicate the game. Not bad. Actually, not bad. We have to be careful here. So let me see if I can figure out an effective winning approach here. So we can go rook b5, but then black plays queen a8. There's got to be a win here. We can play queen c6, king at f7, rook b5, queen a8, rook b7, bishop b7, queen d5, and rook c7. I think the winning approach is to give this weird-looking check on c6. And the purpose of this move is to drag the black king to f7. Now, you might say, well, isn't that a good thing for black? Isn't black now closer to escaping? But if you look concretely, we are now getting the rook to b7 by force, and that check is going to be utterly devastating. Utterly devastating. Okay, queen a8. Now another check. Bishop has to cover. Now, who can tell me what white should do now? Now we win by force. Now, in such positions, the easiest method is just to look for checks, because statistically, it is a lot likelier that the winning move is going to come with check, as you guys are indicating. We slide the queen back to d5, creating contact with the black rook on g8, and that's going to be the key to the winning move in this position. The rook is a type 2 undefended piece. It's defended only by the king. So using that logic, we find the move bishop h6 check, and this ends the game. So a simple attack, just every single piece is participating, maybe with the exception of the rook on c2, but that rook was the engine that got the attack going. All right. There's a lot to talk about. And again, you know, people especially watching on YouTube getting overwhelmed by the level of these games. Like, be patient. I will try to explain all of my logic after the game. And let's start with a little theoretical overview. So this was a Morra. So black played the e6-a6 variation, which is, as far as I can tell, one of the better lines from an objective standpoint. I think the engine is a fan of this line. So here. So b5, bishop b3, bishop b7, castles, exclam, and now knight c6. I think knight c6 is supposed to be an inaccuracy, right? So knight c6, this is a weird looking move because it blocks the bishop. With b4 is chapter 4. Got it. Knight c6 is still... Oh, it's analyzed. Okay. So what is the move here? After knight c6... So, of course, the point is if black plays b4, we go knight d5. If black plays b4, then white goes knight d5. And this sacrifice is... Without the sacrifice, the Morra simply wouldn't exist. So knight c6 is an interesting move. Find the position with bishop d5. Yeah, so this exact position I don't see. I see queen e2, knight c6. Oh, queen... Okay, there we go. Queen e2. Queen e2 transposes to a position from your game against Boris Kryman. This transposes to a position from your game against Kryman. The move is rook e1 here. So I played... Oh, I did play queen e2. So this actually is exactly your position against Kryman. Castles, knight g... If he would have played knight g7, then bishop g5, f6, rook fd1. Thank you, not a stapler for the prime. So you get this crazy position, sacrificing the bishop on g5 and getting, wow, rook takes d7, Jesus. Queen takes d7, bishop takes c6, but this is very scary for black. This is very, very scary for black. But the bottom line is that this is a really entertaining line. So apparently the move here is rook e1. And rook e1 sets up the idea of knight d5 by creating the x-ray against the king. So rook e1, d6, a4, inducing b4, and now knight d5. This looks incredibly juicy. Since we're at this high level, I will say that what I would do if I were sort of playing a very serious game is I would spend probably 15-20 minutes analyzing with a high-level stockfish and using the material at my disposal. So in this case, the book. And I would try to really get to the bottom of the variation. Now, obviously, when you analyze the Morra with stockfish, a lot of times it's giving, 0.3, 0.4 for black, but you cannot conclude anything on the basis of computer evaluations. Because imagine having this position with black. Just any takers in the chat to having this position with black. Or like e takes d5 check. I don't think so. If bishop e7 here, bishop e3, threatening bishop b6, and knight c7 check. And if e takes d5, suddenly you take with a queen. That's really cool, and you cannot defend the f7 pawn. In fact, there is wow, you can get mated here in about 2 seconds. So black is in a lot of trouble here. Very interesting. Oh, you had a game like this. Oh my god. Robert Perez. Yeah, black can probably resign already after queen takes d5. Very cool. So the move is rook e1. For Morra fanatics, the move is rook e1 here in order to set up knight d5. But let's take a look at the game. I played queen e2. Rook c8 was played by our opponent, which is a reasonable improving move. We go rook d1. Now, I played this in the same way that you play the main line. Where did I take queen e2, rook d1? Sure. Okay, so you had a game against Perez. Let me pull up the entire game. Knight b4, queen b6. Okay, so this is after... Okay, you mean this is after queen d5? Oh, you mean... Okay, rook e1, b4, knight d5, knight a5. Knight b4. Queen b6. Okay. So this tries to skewer the pieces along the b file. Yeah, this tries to skewer the pieces along the b file, and now apparently there's some sort of move. Okay, so white to play here. Well, bishop d2 makes sense to defend the knight, but maybe there's something more tactical. That's what I meant about knight c6 hiding in the poke. Oh, I see. But all right, so, but let's take a look at queen e2, because the course of the game actually led to some very interesting complications as well. So queen e2, rook c8, rook d1, knight a5. Yeah, and this seems to be a critical moment. So bishop d5. Bishop d5 would have been possible here as well. E d5, check. I thought about this, but somehow... On queen b6, you mean? Oh, you mean in that line. Queen b6, bishop d5. Oh, shoot. Bishop d5 here. Queen takes b4. Bishop d2 is the idea. I see what you're saying. Queen b6. Bishop takes a5. Queen takes a5. And bishop takes b7. Yeah, that's really cool. Bishop d5 in this position. So rook c8. Rook d1. Knight a5. And now I decided to harass the pawn on d7. So of course there's the alternative idea of putting the bishop on d5. I'm not sure exactly why I rejected it. I felt like this position was unconvincing, but here, for example, there's the move queen f1. Here, for example, there's the move queen f1, threatening rook e1, and it feels like white's got a huge attack. So probably bishop d5 was objectively better. But I missed this one tiny detail, and because of it, this entire line kind of falls by the wayside. So knight e5. So the purpose of this move is to attack d7. And the secondary idea is that if black plays d6, then there is this tactic with knight takes b5. There's this tactic with knight takes b5. So the point is you want the queen to be on d1 so that it is able to take on d5. Yeah, this extra tempo gives black, makes it a lot less likely that stuff like knight d5 works. And if a takes b5, then queen takes b5 check, you get this kind of position with a huge attack against the king. What I missed is that in these types of positions, black has the tactic with queen b6, or counter tactic with queen b6. Maybe not specifically here, but in general. And both knights are hanging, and in some cases, there's no way to get compensation for the piece. So black plays knight f6. Black plays knight f6. We play bishop g5 to reinforce the pressure on d7. Okay, we have a trade on b3. And I was also considering the move rook takes d7 briefly. But you always have to remember that when you're going after your opponent's queen and you're giving up a million pieces, very often a situation arises where the opposing side just has way too many pieces for the queen. This is a great example of that. The simplest that black can do here is knight takes d7, bishop takes d8, and knight takes a1. And black has a rook or two rooks and a piece for the queen, which is way too much material. Way too much material. So for that reason, we have to recapture. d6. And this was the critical moment in the entire game. This is where I missed that if we play knight takes b5, again, the same idea. If AB, then queen takes b5 wins the game, because this is a fork. And the knight on e5 makes it impossible for black to play queen d7. And the bishop on g5 makes it impossible to play knight d7. So this is completely winning, but black has this crazy move, queen b6. And I was unable to find any response to this, any adequate response to this. The problem is that if you move this knight, black captures the other one. If you move the e knight, black captures the b knight. The only thing I saw here was knight takes d6 check, bishop takes d6, and knight c4 with a fork. But the problem here is that black can play rook takes c4, of course, and black has two pieces for a rook. It's not losing, it's probably even... maybe it is losing. Black has two pieces for a rook and incredibly placed minor pieces. This is not appetizing at all. This is not how you go down in the Morra. You don't do something like this and die with a whimper. So for that reason, we veer off with the move knight g4. And I think it is very important to be able to improvise reasonably when your main idea doesn't work. I think this is a precursor for a blunder for most people. The situation where, you go for a long line, and then at the end of the line, you realize that your main idea doesn't work. So, for instance, we realize that knight takes b5 doesn't work. But rather than panicking and doing it anyway, for example, you have to make the most out of a tough situation. So knight f7 and e5 is another idea that some of you saw. But here black has the very typical response h6, bishop h4, and g5. Black keeps the extra piece. Yeah, you cannot just look at, aim for one idea, it doesn't work, and then you just crumble and sack all your pieces randomly. So knight g4 is a good example of that because this keeps the pressure going while avoiding any unnecessary sacrifices. Now, truth be told, I think if black just plays the simple bishop e7, white is probably worse. Not probably, white is definitely worse. But the game continues. The game is not over. And I think the most clinical thing white can do here is probably just take on f6. Now, if black plays gf, then this is kind of like what happened in the game. I would never mind playing such a structure. Especially here, maybe knight h6 and queen h5 is interesting. But if bishop takes f6, then we play knight takes f6 check. Again, if gf, then the game continues. And if queen takes f6, unfortunately, knight takes b5 doesn't work. But you play rook takes d6 and life goes on. You play rook takes d6, you win back the pawn, and life completely goes on. Probably the position is very close to equal here. I don't think white is significantly worse, if worse at all. So probably objectively, black should play g takes f6. But okay, queen h5. And black's king is never going to be safe. So I don't know if that makes sense. But this ability to improvise is very important. So knight g4, h6 by our opponent, which kind of fans the flames of the attack because it allows us to get a super desirable pawn structure and to keep our dark squared bishop, which is the primary instrument of attacking the d6 pawn. So bishop f4. So h5 by our opponent, probably trying to stop our queen from getting to h5. Not a very good use of black's time. I think our opponent should have focused instead on completing his development, bishop e7. His or her development with bishop e7. After h5, we embark on the main plan, which is to attack the d6 pawn. Okay, b4 by our opponent, and the move knight a4, another important detail. Right? How did I know that it was a good idea to put the knight on the rim here? Well, I could anticipate that eventually our knight would have access to the b6 square, and the knight is defended by a pawn, so it won't be a headache with respect to forks and stuff. And I appreciate the opening insight, by the way, from Mark. It's always nice to have the world's leading expert at an opening in the chat. We play knight a4, and also there were no alternatives. Like, no other square was appetizing, and the sacrifice on d5, in my opinion, is no longer as effective because we simply don't have any minor pieces left. I mean, black can probably go bishop e7 here, tuck the king away on f8, and I'm just not sensing sufficient compensation for the piece here, if that makes sense. So by process of elimination, I mean, what, you're going to go back to d1? a4 is the only appetizing square. Queen c7, we complete the doubling with rook a d1. e5, we drop the bishop back to e3. Very important. This sets up knight b6. And if black had played bishop takes e4, we basically have a choice of two moves here. The move I don't like is queen takes a6, because black has, for instance, the move queen b7. And this essentially forces the queen trade, because if white doesn't trade, you give up the pawn on g2, which you cannot afford to give up. Now, even after the queen trade, it's not the end of the world. White continues, but this is not in the spirit of the Morra. I didn't want to allow this. And so for that reason, I think our move here would have been to start with knight b6. And the point that I wanted to make here, this is a very important point, is that in such positions, you can simply play slowly down two pawns. I would claim that white's position is probably not worse here, practically speaking, because we've got such control over the center. Black has this permanently weak king on e8. And it's just much harder to play with black here than with white. And it's a very important thing to understand. If you want to be a Gambit player, you have to be okay with just playing down a pawn or even down a piece and not necessarily, having some sort of checkmate within 3 moves, if that makes sense. You just got to be able to say, okay, this is the notion of long-term compensation that a lot of people struggle to understand. Long-term compensation basically means I don't know exactly where my attack is going to be, but I've got these long-term pluses that are going to give me compensation for a very, very long time. And long-term compensation can be in the form of weak squares. It can be in the form of a permanently weak king, which is the case here, because even if black castles kingside is no safer than the center. So something to chew on if you're like an 1800 player. The notion of long-term compensation is something that is illustrated by this game. I think f5 is the beginning of the end. I think giving away this pawn, our opponent tried to open the diagonal for their bishop, but after f3, black's quote-unquote initiative ends, and this pawn is a pretty big asset that can potentially move into f6, and black's position just crumbles completely here. h4, knight b6, rook d8. We get our rook to the open c-file. We move our knight back to d5 as planned to get rid of black's last good piece. And then, this position is completely winning. We're dominating on all sides. Now, maybe black didn't defend as best as he could. Maybe queen b7 was a little bit more resilient. But we would have played queen c4, and it's only a matter of time before we get to black's king. Oh yeah, I was going to show bishop takes f3, which I missed after rook c2. But according to Mark, so bishop takes f3 is something that I overlooked. This is a deflection sacrifice, or deflection tactic, rather. Because if we take the queen, then black takes our queen. But there is a very pretty idea. Queen takes f3, queen takes c2, and rook c1. But here black might have e4. Oh my god. The point of rook c1 is that if black just moves back to d3, then there's a check on c6, and this is crushing. Knight d5 check, and this wins the queen. So this would have been winning on the spot, but e4 is problematic. Queen f1, there's queen d3. It's still unclear. I still probably would take white here. Yeah, e4 is such a funny move. I guess we can play queen h3. Black will probably play queen e2. And then maybe we can find some... And then maybe knight d5, for example. Even this position is very difficult to play with black. Even this position is very difficult to play with black. I don't think black is winning here. I definitely don't think black is winning here. Yeah, this knight dominates the board. We're threatening knight f6. Now, perhaps black can play queen d3 to prevent knight d5. But then we maybe play... Oh my god, there's such a beautiful idea. There's f6. Look at this line. f6, d5, rook c7, and let's say black plays d4. Who can find the gorgeous mating idea? Who can find the gorgeous mating idea? Come on, guys. Queen e6, bang. f7, checkmate. This is what you get when you play gambits. These kinds of ideas. And the crazy thing is, this might be the objectively best move, rook c7. Because if queen b1 check, king f2, but maybe black has bishop d6 here. And queen e6 check no longer works. That's sad. Takes, check, f8. Oh, it's almost mate, but black survives. But you can see the kinds of ideas that white has in this position, which means that the game is very, very far from over. Very, very far from over. f6, d5, you should even consider queen c8 here, although that doesn't work. Queen takes e3 as check. So, plenty of rich tactical ideas, even when we're down this much material. But I don't think I should have allowed bishop takes f3. I think that the immediate knight d5 might have been objectively better. But in any case, rook c2, we got a little fortunate. This was the Smith-Morra, Lily. This was the Smith-Morra. Knight d5, trade, and f6, queen takes a6 is game over. This is really easy. After e4, nice little idea to play queen c6 check. Yeah, who would ever write a book about that Gambit? With the idea of forcing the king onto f7 so that this move comes with check, right? Just like simple, straightforward attacking chess. Simple, straightforward attacking chess. And bishop h6 check just ends it. Yeah, so this was a pretty, 33 moves, but a lot happened in those 33 moves. To summarize, in the opening, we come to the conclusion that rook e1 is much more accurate than the way I played it. Queen e2 invests an extra tempo in the setting up of this heavy piece formation, and that tempo is not something that white can afford in a lot of different lines because it allows black to make one of these really annoying moves such as knight a5, and you want to keep this bishop alive for as long as possible. So that's a good insight about playing this opening at a deeper level. Rook c8, rook d1, knight a5, and then we went for this false idea of trying to induce d6 so that we can sack on b5. It was a really cool idea, but it doesn't seem to do the trick. Bishop g5, takes d6. Now the importance of improvising and not losing your mind when one of your ideas doesn't work. So that's the notion of the move knight g4. Then we saw the importance of long-term compensation, and the rest of the game from this point on was pretty straightforward. Doubling rooks in order to attack d6 was an important plan. Yeah, bishop c2, the bishop becomes ineffective, right? You want to keep, it's basically either you want to keep the bishop on b3 or the bishop is basically useless. So bishop c2 already is surrenders the initiative completely. It surrenders the initiative completely. Yeah, definitely a game that can be analyzed for a lot longer, but it's 3:30. I'm exhausted. I'm sorry if I wasn't as coherent in this game as I normally am, just because I'm really, really tired. Enjoy. See you guys tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out. Goodbye.